There we go. Okay. So the first way we can use this is to actually build our mesh in 3Shaper, and that will create the honeycomb pattern. So I'm going to go right into 3Shaper. And I didn't select anything because I don't want to convert anything to a 3Shaper object. And I'm just going to freeze that, hide some of these curves. And I'm just going to start with a quick quad shape here as a 2D mesh. And we will subdivide it a bit. And then we'll just, using points, give it some quick modeling here. So just resize these. Oops. Alright, that'll give us a fun shape to play around with. Okay, so what I want to do is select all of these points, and I'm going to project them up in the model. So any way you get your mesh onto the model is fine. This is one way you can do it if you have 3Shaper Pro. This one would be a difficult one to do with the basic tools. You'd have to manually align all your points to the object. Now, if you have retopology, you could draw your mesh directly onto the ring itself, which is definitely the best way to do it. So depending on which version you have some advantages. So we're going to go ahead and project these up onto the model using Project Onto. And I want to use a support object. So under configuration, we'll choose my ring. And we will do a project according to normal, like so. And then I'll do an optimize just to clean it up a bit and get it perfectly on the surface. All right, so that's it. We have our design, our mesh design up on the model. We'll go ahead and exit out of 3Shaper. And we will select our ring and launch the honeycomb tool. And instead of a list of positions like we would normally do, we now have this new option here called Use a Subdivision Surface. So that mesh I created is going to create my honeycomb pattern. I'll give that a second to calculate. All right. So we see the honeycomb pattern forming here. Now we will have some issues here. My honeycombs are facing into the ring finger and not up into the model. So let's cancel out of that, and I'll explain why that happened. So we'll go back into my edit surface here. My surface is pointing up. We want it to point down. So we just select this entire surface and give it a quick reverse surface orientation. So now that the face of the mesh is facing the inside of the ring finger. And now we will go back and redo that honeycomb. Use a subdivision surface. And there we go. Okay. Now you can of course adjust your honeycomb depth, sizes, thicknesses, and all that fun stuff, just like you would with normal honeycombs. You can see the pattern is based on your mesh. You have these custom ajours. Okay. Now, one more thing to note, if I go to Boolean these together, I'm not going to Boolean it to the ring because I already know it's going to be bad. There's a few more things I have to do to the mesh that I want to show you. So let me go ahead and Boolean this and see. Well, today it's just fine, but I still have a problem with the corners are rounded. So let's go back into my edit surface and see why that is. With a mesh, it's typically has smooth edges. And in previous versions, you only had a choice of smooth points. So my corner points are smooth instead of sharp, and we get these rounded corners. If we want the outside to be all sharp like the inside ones are. Go into points here. Let me hide some things. Okay, you can select these points, and the only new tool which was created for this very purpose is in your edges and vertices section. You have a transform a vertex into a point, so that will create an actual point there instead of a normal vertex, sharpening your edges. So if we recalculate that, we will see those corners become points. Now, sometimes your mesh shape will have, like I said, when you're booleaning it together, you're going to have some weird results, parts of your model. Oh, I do have that here. Yeah. So same issue here. We've got some weird honeycombs going on some of these. And you go to boolean that, it's going to either make the model disappear or crash. Bad things happen. So one thing to keep in mind is you probably want to sharpen the entire edge points. So I'm going to select this entire sharp border and then do an Alt select to grab the points instead. If you haven't taken my 3Shaper class, you'll learn a lot of these tricks. I recommend it. And we'll go right into transforming all those into sharp points and recalculate. Okay, so you see that takes care of those messed up honeycombs around the edges. We want them all sharp points all the way around. That'll give us nice clean meshes that we can now boolean properly from our ring. So we'll go ahead and hide my model, bring back my ring, and we'll go ahead and subtract that and see our nice custom azure pattern going here. Okay, so great trick if you want some to remove some metal, and instead of just scooping it, you want to do some nice azures. You can use this for doing piercing through more thin type rings, so setting up patterns that way. All kinds of creative stuff you can do with that. So great tool they came up with, linking the two modelers together. That opens the doors for a lot of stuff in the future that we can do with that kind of thing too. So these first two are just the tip of the hat with that sort of thing. So the other way we can use the honeycomb is to fix issues with honeycomb. So let's go ahead and do a new ring here. And we'll do a quick ring size builder. And I don't need the plane. I'm going to place my starting point at the bottom. If you remember from last time, we can now do that. So that's going to put the edge, surface edge down at the bottom instead of the top like we used to be stuck with. And we'll do a profile shape, a cross section, and I'll just do a simple rectangle with some rounded corners. And we'll go ahead and sweep this with the sweeping wizard. Okay, add my section. And go ahead and scale it to the size that I want. It's pretty good, 8x2. All right, quick, easy band. And now I'm going to set up my pave like I would normally do to create a honeycomb. And I'm just going to do a nice, fun, odd shape on the top instead of a simple pattern like we would normally do. That's usually where you see the honeycomb having issues, because the automatic calculation of the shapes are a little more difficult when you have an odd pattern of stones. So we'll just go ahead and take this curve and move it above the surface and project it back down. And get rid of that extra one and hide that one. Okay, so and again, if you remember from the last webinar, the new Pave, Expert Pave or Enhanced Pave now has an option. We don't have to make a cutout to do our Pave patterns. Can't even say that. Pave patterns, we can now use a curve. So we'll do that here. So we'll select the ring, go into Advanced Pave. Give that a second. Oh, Okay, and you saw that took a while to calculate, and that's because my extra edge there. Let's go ahead and go back into my sweeping wizard. Remember, with your sweeping tools, you now have, and since V8, we have the option of create a single surface. So we'll recalculate that across there and relaunch the pave. Much faster, less surfaces that has to calculate. And for the frontiers, I'm going to turn on test frontiers. Instead of using a surface, we're going to use a curve. Okay. And let's just go ahead and see what we can come up with an auto pave. I'm going to use the snow setting and give it some random stone sizes here. One new thing about the snow setting is you now have to tell it how many stones you have to choose from. So you can use what you have in your inventory. If you've only got, let's say, 10 1mm, you'll tell it that. And let's say we've got some 1.1s, and I've got 20 of those. And we'll do 1.2, and I've got 15. And so on and so on. So you can really go in and specify how many stones you want the auto generator to choose from. And let's see how that looks. Yeah, not bad. Okay, we'll go ahead and go to the validity tab and scatter these around. Optimize that spacing. That will work for now. We'll go ahead, and another new feature is if we go to the preview tab, we can go ahead and add to history tree. When I validate, that'll go ahead and automatically set my stones, so I don't have to go back and jewel them in. Okay, so let's go ahead and select the stones and start creating our honeycomb. Okay, I'm going to use all the positions, so I don't need to filter any of those, and we'll choose the ring as the support object. And go here to calculate our honeycomb. Okay, so you can see with the this random pattern, we've got some honeycombs that don't really work out so well. This one's too tiny. This one here. So the other cool thing we could do with this link to 3Shaper is if you select your honeycombs after you've built them and launch 3Shaper, instead of automatically trying to convert those into meshes, you now have an option. We can import them like we normally would. It's going to try to convert each one of those little honeycomb pieces into its own mesh. Or we can use import function. This is also going to allow you to use the support solid in 3Shaper as well. So we'll keep that checked. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a mesh for you based on your honeycomb pattern. And now we can modify the mesh and reshape our honeycombs. If you have retopology, it's going to automatically open you up right into retopology. That's the, like I said, the best option if you have it, because we're using that link to support. So I can move these points around. It's already going to stay magnet to the surface. Easiest way to do it. If you have V2 Pro or basic 3Shaper, it's going to probably jump you right into the move tool instead. You'll have to use the move and link to support options in there for that version. So it really depends on what version you have, how it opens up. And now we can go in and just simply modify my mesh. So maybe I want this pattern on the bottom to come out to the edge instead of matching the original shape. Okay, remember V8, a lot of our tools we can now recalculate live, so if you want to see those changes, and just update as you go. Okay. And we'll just go ahead and just manipulate our pattern. I was hoping for a little more weirdness on some of these shapes, but it seems like other than some of the tiny ones, this one came out pretty good. You will have to sometimes maybe unfold some points. You'll notice when you convert it to the mesh, you'll see some of your points are crisscross. So again, that'll fix any of those weird issues that you had from the auto calculation of your honeycombs. We can reshape these however we want. The one thing you don't want to do if you're using retopology is delete or rub out any polygons, because you delete parts of the mesh that will mess up your honeycomb pattern. So keep that in mind. Only modify it. Don't delete it. I haven't tested it. You probably can add more cells to it. You have to play around with that, but let's go ahead and recalculate. And we see fixing those little pieces. We've modified our pattern. We'll go back and cut those out. And you'll see with this one, they are all sharp edges. We don't have to fix them like we did on the manually created one. So we should be good to go. Go ahead and subtract that for you. And there we go. Okay, so using 3Shaper to modify your meshes makes the honeycomb tool much more powerful. You have much more control over customizing it. You're not just stuck with whatever pattern you were given. And you can also use it without pavéing by creating your own mesh and creating patterns freehand. So that's the honeycomb tool. Let's stop and see if there's any questions on that. Stupid question, is retop same as 3Shaper Pro? No. 3Shaper Pro is the standard shaper that you would buy now. It was the upgrade to V1 and it has all of the extra tools. Retopology is its own single separate tool. I will let Bob discuss pricing on that because I don't know pricing, but it is a, make sure I have nothing selected here. It is a separate tool. It's mostly used for reverse engineering. You can use it to draw meshes on STL or other objects that you import. You can use it for stuff like this, where you're drawing meshes directly on your ring for creating patterns. It's a really powerful tool. Do all kinds of things with it. So if you have a 3D scanner and you want to use that scan data easily, perfect for that. Great extra add-on tool. That was retopology. It automatically went right into retopology when I launched into 3Shaper with my honeycombs. So yeah, you can see that I was able to just grab the points and move them along the surface. That's the other advantage of it. If you are not using retopo, let's go back into that mesh. You will be brought into using the move tool. With the move tool, we want to use the fourth option, which is move according to a support object. And it's already selected because of the import option. And now instead of just sliding it around easily with retopo, you have your handle that you can move it around. You can see it's not as smooth. It takes a little more nudging to get things right. You got to be careful because you can also move in the Z direction. But definitely still workable. And yeah, that's really the only difference in the terms of this tool. But retopology does a ton more options. If you haven't seen the retopo video in the training lounge, definitely watch that. There's a couple videos in there. All right, so let's, any more questions on honeycomb? We'll move on to baguettes next. Yeah, good to go. Let me recalculate that. All right, so you can see those changes there. Go ahead and start a new file. All right, so for baguettes, let's go ahead and set up. I'm going to do a really simple pendant for the example here. We'll do like a nice little S pendant. And I don't like flat and boring, so we'll do a side curve as well. It's a nice arc to it. And we'll just use 3D curve from 2 views. If you're not using this tool, it's been there since V6 and it's awesome. You can draw two views and turn it into a 3-dimensional shape. I'll create my rails. We'll just hide the original curves. I'll make a nice pendant shape. And we just need a profile. Let's do something like that. Okay, simple, sweet. All right, so for my baguette rails, we'll go ahead and draw those in here as well. I'm going to just kind of follow the edge here. Of course, there's many different ways we can get these onto the surface, but we'll just simply draw them for today. And we'll go ahead and move them in sketch mode this time so I don't have to ungroup them later. And a quick projection. And we'll just hide some stuff. There we go. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and save this. And we'll start this one with baguettes. If you've used the baguette tool, you've noticed in the the first version in V8, sometimes you would have some issues with some odd shaped stones because your endpoints aren't quite even, things like that. If you're going around really extreme curves, you get some really trapezoidal shapes. And because it's just automatically calculated between the two curves, there wasn't much you can do about it. So again, this is where this 3-shaper enhancement is going to help you fix those and manually adjust your stone shapes. So let's go ahead and run the baguette as we normally would. Okay, first thing we do is make sure our stones are pointing down and not up. They are because of the order I selected the curves in, so we'll just reverse those. Freeze that so we can see. And we're going to, I don't need 33 of them in here. That's a lot of editing for this example. So we'll do 10 stones across there. Yeah, maybe a few more. Okay, so we can already see I've got some issues here with this end stone sticking out there. It doesn't quite match the shape that I wanted. So back in V8, I'd have to go, rethink my strategy and readjust the curves and figure out what I'm going to do. Now we'll just use the, probably help if I actually create the channel. And we now have the channel under the stone. So that's the one we're going to be editing here. That's also a new enhanced feature of the baguettes is you have the bottom channel now. You don't have to scoop it out manually or sweep it out. So we'll go ahead and do that. And again, selecting my baguettes, if we launch into 3-shaper, we're going to get that option to import the function. I'm going to keep the support. So this time it's recognizing that it's not a support object that I set my baguettes on, it was a support curve. So I'm going to keep that support curve so that I can stay aligned to those curves. Let's go ahead and validate that. Okay, and you see this brought me into the move tool. This one doesn't go into retopology because retopology is I guess you could set it up with curves and retopology, but in this case, because it's already linked to the curves, we can just move the points along the curve. So we'll go ahead and select that point and fix these ends first. And then we can adjust the rest of the shapes. Again, like I said, if you're going around these weird corners, you may want some more natural shaped baguettes. It might be easier to cut those instead of trying to get those all as trapezoids. So again, you can adjust it as needed. Okay. Otherwise, it's the same idea as the honeycomb. We'll go ahead and recalculate those. And when we go back into here, let me go ahead and because I validated before I created the piece, I'm going to have to filter the stones so you can see them. Oh, nope. No stones to filter. What did I do? Ah, there we are. Filter. All right, so you can see the shapes are now updated. to the mesh. So you get a little more control over shaping your baguettes. Okay. And then finally, if we want, we can, let's just do something simple here. Okay, we'll go ahead and draw our baguette shapes this time. This time I will use Retopo just because you guys were asking. Some of you guys aren't familiar with it quite yet. So like I said, we could do this like I did before by drawing or shaping a mesh, projecting it, trying to match to the surface. Or with Retopo, what I can do is jump right in here. We'll set my support object as this solid here. And that'll allow me to go ahead and draw my baguettes directly on the surface. These are going to be some fun shaped baguettes here. Why not? And, oops. Ah, there it is. We'll go ahead and sharpen the corners so we don't have rounded baguettes on the ends. That would be quite odd. All right, and this time when I launch my baguette tool, again, we have that option. We can use a subdivision surface to create the baguettes instead of between curves. Okay. So we can always go back into our model and reshape it. Again, if you have Retopo, it makes it really easy. So we can just slide these, oops, go into edit mode, just slide these points around. And calculate that. All right. So that is it. Like I said, 2 ways of using both those new tools, going into Shaper first and using that to design your honeycombs and baguettes, or using the old-fashioned way of creating them using the curves or surfaces, and then being able to modify them when you have issues with them.